We've made it to the end of this series. I've been working through the best fantasy books of every decade since the 1950s. Today, my top 10 best fantasy novels since 2020.
Welcome back to Fantasy for the Ages, the show where father and son sit down and talk about fantasy books. In this case, one's just from 2020 on. I'm the son of that equation, Zach.
And I'm the father, Jim. Thanks for joining us today for this epic conclusion to some epic fantasy books that we've been having a great time talking about. These are my best fantasy novels that have come out since 2020. There are a lot of fantasy books that have come out since 2020, and I've read some. So I'm pretty sure there are some books that might be on this list if I've read them, but I haven't read them and I couldn't include them yet. I don't know enough about them, but these are my 10. If you have different ones after you watch this list, put them down in the comments. I'll love to hear about them. Heck, you might add things to my TBR. I know Zach probably has some different books here too than I'm going to have on my 10.
Look, it's only been a few years. I actually know which books came out in this time for some of them.
So after I go through my 10, I'll be very interested to hear what he's got on his list. And we'll see. We'll see how this all comes out. But yeah, I've got 6 on this list that are absolute. I am very confident. These are top 10 material. And then I have 4 more that I really like. And of all the books I've read so far, they make my top 10, but I'm not sure they have lasting power. As I read more books, they might slide off.
And we get more of the decade.
Right. I mean, we're only 2024 at this point. There's so much more to come. Nevertheless, I'm happy to give shout outs to these other 4 books too, because right now they make my top 10. They're solid fantasy reads, and if you haven't read them yet, you should probably go check them out. So let's do the list and see what Zach thinks of what I came up with. Number 10 is Demon's Tear, book 1 of the Gentakai Saga by R.E. Sanders. This just came out in 2024, self-published. He already has a couple of other standalone. There's a book and a novella, but then this was the start of a series, and there isn't anything else out yet. But Demon's Tear was excellent. He's really got some great writing. It's a very traditional fantasy world. There's a nice level of mystery as you're trying to figure out what's going on. What's the deeper story here? And it really sucked me in. I'm looking forward to the next book in the Gentakai Saga when it comes out. If you haven't read Demon's Tear,
which I haven't,
really recommend it. I need to get you that book. Actually, I might have already given you that book. No, on Kindle. Yeah,
you may have. You may have sent that one. There are a couple that you've sent me that I have to get to, partially because it's my slowest form of reading.
Number 9 is not self-published. It's The Burning God, book 3 of the Poppy War trilogy by R.F. Kuang.
I almost grabbed that one and then didn't.
It came out in 2020. The first 2 books of the trilogy are in the previous decade, and they did not rise high enough to bump out the others I had on that list. But in 2020s, yeah, I can still put this one here at number 9. The Burning God is dark. There's a lot of action in this story, and it's a culmination of what's built up over the first 2 books of the trilogy. And, it's one that doesn't really make you all happy and cheerful, but it is deep and moving, and it hits. So The Burning God.
As much as I enjoy that book and that author, I think as time goes on, that one will get knocked down.
Number 8 is another self-published book, The Return of the Knights. Book
That's
1
of waiting for me.
Book 1 of the Dance of Light series by Gregory Contaxis. This came out in 2021. Now, The Return of the Knights, it really delighted me. I enjoyed this story way more than I expected. He already has a novella, The Night of the Moon, and book 2, the Something of the Giants. It's slipping my mind right now. I'll put it up on the screen. Out in the series as well. And they're good, but they're not as good as book one for me. Okay, so this is the one that makes my top 10 and made it worth reading. But you know how things go with series and sagas sometimes, especially if it's like a trilogy. Book two is often a little dip to build up to book three, and that's
You
what
and
I'm
I
expecting
have
from the Return of the Knights.
vastly different opinions. I am a book two truther. I'm an Empire is the best in the original trilogy. Uh, book two is where it's at usually. There's plenty of books that fail on, like trilogies that fail on that, and they do slump. But a good book two is the best book in a trilogy.
Book two is The Fall of the Giants. It finally clicked for me there. And again, it's not bad, not at all. But The Return of the Knights just captivated me, partly because it was so much better than I expected. That's all. I didn't go in with any high expectations. Just, oh, here's another fantasy book, and wow, it's great world building, engaging characters, and a storyline that grabbed me. So, The Return of the Knights. Number 7 is Tress of the Emerald Sea by
Oh, that's
Brandon
nice.
Sanderson, his first of his secret novels, which came out in 2023. I'm not gaga for any of the secret novels, but this one, there was enough to it that I found some charm, a good story, and it added some slight elements to the Cosmere that I appreciated. So
Tress
it
is
makes it on here.
surprisingly delightful.
Yeah, surprisingly delightful. I like that. Number 6 on my list is one that I think has more staying power, and that's The Lost Metal. Book 7 of Mistborn, so the final book of Era 2 of the Mistborn sequence by Brandon Sanderson, which came out in 2022. I find Era 2 to be stronger, more entertaining than Era 1 for my preferences as a reader, even though I like all of Mistborn. But I really felt this delivered in a nice way to wrap up the era and launch us off to more to come, which we know there is more Mistborn to come. So it's strong for me. A nice number 6. What are your thoughts?
My preference as a reader, I enjoyed the first one better. The Lost Metal didn't quite fall flat for me, but it didn't deliver in the way that I wanted it to, simply because it felt like it was closure, but not real satisfying payoff always.
Interesting.
With some exceptions, like some of the main story parts, some of the biggest things that happen, absolutely, payoff, cool. But a lot of the other little elements are just like, no, we're going to tie that off for now. We're tying it off loosely so that we can solve it in another series or in another trilogy later on in Mistborn stuff.
Okay.
And I like having that work moving
All
forward,
right.
but it wasn't a big climactic payoff, and it didn't land the
Gotcha.
quadrilogy for me.
Okay. Number 5, The Living Dead by George A. Romero and Daniel Kraus. This came out in 2020 and is the second best zombie apocalypse story I've ever read. You know, George A. Romero, of course, is the guy who started the whole modern thing of zombies with his classic movie, Night of the Living Dead. And he did many other movies, but he wrote The Living Dead because what he really wanted to do with this story that he's trying to create on the screen, Hollywood wouldn't let him do. There were too much politics going on, too many limitations. So he's like, fine, screw
I'll
you,
do it
I'll
myself.
write it. Unfortunately, he puttered away with this book throughout the rest of his life. He never finished it. So when he passed away, the estate hired Daniel Kraus, who'd already written some zombie apocalyptic literature and had actually met George during life, brought him in, say, hey, take all this, give us a story. And we end up with The Living Dead. And it's just a totally different take on where all this zombie stuff should go. It was fascinating. It's really well written. And I just read it this past year and totally enjoyed it.
This is one of the few zombie books that I might actually read. It's rare for me. I'm not super into the genre because I feel like it's a little hackneyed to me specifically. But this one, there are reasons, especially its significance within the genre, that I might read it.
I'll throw in an added incentive here. One of my friends is an author, and he's very picky about the style of writing. There are things that I've enjoyed that he's tried and gone, Jim, that's trash. He's not a zombie reader necessarily, but he read this one and he was like, this is good. This is just really well crafted, well written, excellent story. And I was like, I win one. And yes, Eric, I was talking about you. Next, number 4, The Last Druid, the final book of the Shannara series by Terry Brooks. This came out in 2020. Now, this is now a misnomer, but I have Shannara already appearing back in the 70s and the 80s, a few different places. This is the final book, except now it's not the final book. Terry Brooks has started writing Shannara books again. We have another book coming out in March of 2025 as he's writing his Druids of Shannara series. It's going to be more backstory stuff, though. It's not advancing. This was the end of the narrative.
I'll read this big, long 30-some book series at some point. It's definitely in the list, but after the Realm of the Elderlings, which I'm working my way through.
Okay. The Last Druid is this high because, again, culmination of everything that's come before, finishing it up, tying up some ends, and yet it doesn't just end the story. It's a little more realistic. It's not like, and then everything blew up and it was gone. No, there's more that will happen. It's just, we're done talking about it. Now for books you won't agree with, maybe. I don't know. But number 3 is Peace Talks. Book 16 from the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher, which came out in 2020. And it's a heck of a book as it sets up the next book, but it finishes up so many things that have been laid out over the first 15 books and has some key elements that happen in it that I just really enjoyed. We had to wait a while if you were a Dresden fan for this book, but I didn't because I didn't read any of them until these books came out in 2020. That's when I read 2020 and 2021. I read the entire Dresden Files series. So I just got to get to this and then keep going to the next book. But Peace Talks was fantastic.
I know you well enough to know that the next book is going to show up higher in this list. They don't deserve the spots you're giving them, I think. But if you put the two of them together, I'm okay with it being like a slot 10.
Okay.
They're good. They are good.
They're good.
They have payoff.
Number 2 on my list is Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, which also came out in 2020. I'm rereading it right now, but it's just so good. So good. And, this list is going to change. I mean, Wind and Truth comes out later this year. It's going to make the top 10 of this decade without a doubt. But yeah, number 1 is Battleground.
I saw this coming.
Book 17 of the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher also came out in 2020, just 6 months after Peace Talks. And like Zach was inferring, it's really one book, Peace Talks, Battleground, but it was too big, didn't fit his format. So he broke it in a natural place, and you've got 2 separate books. Battleground, I mean, battle in the name is very appropriate because most of the book is one massive battle. A lot of huge elements that take place here, a lot of series shifting events that occur. There will be more books to come in the Dresden Files. This is where it stops right now, but it will not be the same Dresden Files because of this book. And I love the Dresden Files, so it's number 1.
I'll give you the Dresden Files for all the crap I gave it. Has some good books, and if you put these two together, they are good, and they do have payoff for having read 17 books. It's not slot 1 worthy. It's not better than Rhythm of War.
All right. I love Rhythm of War. Its themes are deeper, but I'm just so entertained by Dresden Files. So it's my preference, but I get you. Now, we all want to know, what do you have from the 2020s that I didn't say anything about? What would you put on a top 10?
So as I said, there are some that I still am like, Was this 2019? Was it 2020? I'm not sure. But there were some just sitting on my bookshelf that I could look over and go, yeah, those are 2020s. So we're going to save probably the best of those for last and start with one that I think will hit my top 10. It's on a number of people's out there. But I have not read it yet.
Okay.
2023, this is The Will of the Many by James
Ah,
Enchanting.
yep. I haven't read that either. James Islington.
James Islington, Will of the
Looks
Many.
good.
It looks to be really, really, really good. I've heard great things. I have not read it yet, but soon.
Viewers, you can agree with Zach and put down in the comments yes or no. Let us know. What else, Zach?
The next one is an author that we've seen on your list, but a different book, and that's going to be Babel by R.F. Kuang.
I haven't read that one
This
yet.
was a 2022. It's definitely a different vibe than most of everything else we've talked about. A little bit more of a literary book and style. It has footnotes. But I really enjoyed it. Very unique magic system.
Okay.
Good book.
All right.
And then comes the one where this would absolutely be in my top 5. I don't know where exactly, but absolutely. It's another 2022 book, Jade Legacy. The climactic finish of the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee.
Nice. See, I haven't read those yet. They're high on the TBR, but I don't know enough about them.
That trilogy is so stupid good.
Yeah, give me 5 more years and doing this list again, this was going to look very different. I have no doubt.
I think at least one, if not multiple of the ones that I just mentioned, will probably hit your top 10.
Anything else, or was that it?
That's all I've got prepared.
Excellent. So, viewers, thank you for being with us. We hope you enjoyed hearing about all these great books. I'm always happy to add more to my TBR, so put down in the comments other books from the 2020s that you definitely think are top 10 worthy. We want to know about it, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on the books that we put on this list, the ones I did as well as the ones Zach contributed. Tell us, what do you think? And we'll definitely respond. While you're at it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell and see all the other things Zach and I keep sending out here on Fantasy for the Ages. Thanks for watching. I got nothing else, Zach. You?
I'm good.
All right. We'll talk to you next time.